Broken English, broken confidence. Have you ever opened your mouth to speak English, then stopped halfway, because your brain whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself"? Maybe you've studied for years, watched hundreds of videos, memorized lists of words, yet when a real person stands in front of you, everything disappears. That was me. 2 weeks ago, standing in the United States, with bad English, a tired heart and a quiet fear. Is my English too broken to belong here? If you've ever felt like giving up, this story is already about you. I didn't arrive in America with big dreams and perfect sentences. I arrived with a suitcase that didn't roll straight, a phone full of translation apps, and a voice that sounded smaller every time I tried to speak. The airport was loud, cold, and fast. People spoke English like water flowing from a tap. No pauses, no subtitles. My English, on the other hand, came out like drops. Slow drops. Sometimes the tap didn't work at all. The first time a stranger asked me, "How are you doing today?" My brain froze. You'd think this is the easiest question in the world. I knew the answer. But knowing something in your head and saying it out loud are two different sports. My mouth said, "I am okay, thank you." It sounded wrong. Too slow. Too careful. The man smiled politely, nodded, and walked away. Nothing bad happened. But inside me, something cracked. You see, when your English is bad, your confidence quietly follows it downhill. Not because people are mean. Most people aren't. It's because you start judging yourself before anyone else can. Psychologists call this self-monitoring overload. Your brain is busy checking grammar, pronunciation, accent, and meaning, all at the same time. That leaves very little space for confidence. So your voice gets softer. Your sentences get shorter. Sometimes you choose silence, because silence feels safer than being wrong. In those first days in America, I spoke less and listened more. Not because I wanted to. Because my brain was tired. Learning a language in a classroom is one thing. Using it to survive daily life is another. At the grocery store, I rehearsed sentences in my head like a nervous actor before a play. Where is the milk? Simple, right? But when the employee actually stood in front of me, my sentence broke into pieces. Milk, where is? He still understood. He still helped me. But again, my confidence took a small hit. Here's something interesting. Neuroscience says your brain feels social mistakes almost like physical pain. That's why saying the wrong thing in English can feel strangely painful, even when nothing bad happens. Your nervous system doesn't care that you're learning. It only knows, we might be rejected. So it tries to protect you by making you quiet. Basically, your brain is overprotective. Like a parent who won't let you ride a bike because you might fall. One evening, after another day of small conversations and big internal battles, I sat alone and thought, maybe my English is too bad for this place. Not for work. Not for success. But for connection. For love. For family. That thought hurts more than any grammar mistake. Because language is not just about words. It's about being seen. What makes it worse is comparison. In America, you hear fluent English everywhere. On TV. In cafes. Even children speak better English than you. Your brain collects this data and creates a cruel conclusion. Everyone is ahead of me. But here's the part no one tells you. Fluency hides struggle. You don't see how many mistakes people made to get there. You only see the final version. And you compare it to your rough draft. So let me slow this down for you. This video is not about perfect English. It's about real English. The kind you use when your voice shakes a little. The kind that comes with pauses, simple words, and a strong accent. Research shows that emotional connection improves language retention. When you feel safe, your brain learns faster. When you feel ashamed, it shuts down. That means confidence is not a reward after fluency. Confidence is the path to fluency. In those moments of broken English, I started doing one small thing. I spoke slower. Not to sound smarter, but to breathe. Slow speech sends a signal to your nervous system. We are not in danger. Your brain relaxes. Words come back. Listening improves. This is why slow English practice works. Not because it's easy, but because it's kind to your brain. Looking back, my English didn't break me. My expectations did. I wanted to sound native. I wanted to be perfect. And perfection is heavy. Too heavy to carry into real life. When I finally allowed my English to be imperfect, something surprising happened. People leaned in. They listened. They waited. Communication became human again. So if today you feel like your English is broken, let me tell you something gently. Broken English still carries meaning. Still carries love. Still carries you. And that is enough to keep going. 2 weeks in America. Imagine waking up and not knowing if you need a jacket, an umbrella, or just courage. That was my reality during my first 2 weeks in America. The weather changed its mind faster than my English sentences. One morning was sunny and polite. By afternoon, the wind cut through my coat like it had personal issues with me. And inside my head, a quiet thought kept repeating. If I can't even predict the weather, how can I survive conversations here? The first thing you notice in America is space. The sky feels bigger. Roads are wider. Stores are enormous. Even silence feels louder. Back home, life wrapped around me tightly. Sounds, people, familiar words. Here, everything was open, fast, and slightly indifferent. And when your English is slow, that openness feels exposed. You feel seen before you feel understood. During those 2 weeks, every simple task became a language test. Buying coffee wasn't just buying coffee. It was listening, processing, responding, and hoping your accent didn't turn latte into something confusing. The barista asked questions with a smile that moved quicker than my comprehension. Room for cream? For here or to go? Each question hit my brain like a small pop quiz. I answered late, sometimes wrong, sometimes with a nod and a prayer. Here's the strange part. Nobody rushed me. Nobody laughed. But my body still reacted like I was under attack. My shoulders tightened. My heart raced. This is called language anxiety, and studies show it spikes in immersive environments. Your brain is doing double work, understanding meaning and protecting your identity. Because when language is weak, identity feels fragile. You don't just fear mistakes. You fear being misunderstood as a person. The climate didn't help. In 1 week, I experienced cold mornings, warm afternoons, and evenings that felt like winter had returned for unfinished business. Locals adapted without thinking. They talked about weather casually, using phrases I'd never practiced. It's gonna warm up later. Feels colder than it looks. These aren't textbook sentences. They're living English. And living English doesn't wait for you to catch up. At night, I replayed conversations in my head. Not because they were dramatic, but because my brain wanted closure. Did I sound rude? Too quiet? Too stupid? Psychologists say the brain replays social interactions to learn, but with language learners, this replay often turns into self-criticism. Instead of learning, you punish yourself. That's when motivation quietly leaks out. On day 6, I noticed something small but important. I was understanding more than I could speak. My listening was improving, even when my speaking lagged behind. This gap is normal. Linguists call it the silent growth phase. Your brain is absorbing patterns, rhythm, and tone before it feels safe to produce them. The problem is, most adults think silence equals failure. It doesn't. It means your brain is working behind the scenes. I started walking more. Long walks through quiet neighborhoods. I listened to people talk as they passed by, couples arguing softly, parents calling their kids, neighbors greeting each other with short, lazy sentences. No one sounded perfect. Grammar was bent. Words were swallowed. And suddenly, English felt less like a test and more like a tool. A messy, flexible tool. One afternoon, I stood at a crosswalk, unsure if I could cross. A woman next to me said, "You're good. Go ahead." Simple words. Clear tone. I smiled and said, "Thank you." My voice was still accented, still slow. But it didn't matter. Communication happened. That tiny success stayed with me all day. There's science behind this. Small wins release dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical. You don't need big conversations. You need tiny confirmations that you belong. Every thank you, every nod, every shared smile builds a quiet foundation. And over time, confidence grows not from fluency, but from familiarity. By the end of the second week, America didn't feel smaller. I felt steadier. My English hadn't magically improved, but my fear had softened. I stopped trying to sound smart and focused on sounding clear. I spoke slower. I paused without apologizing. Pauses are not failure. They're punctuation. If you're learning English and dreaming of living it, not just studying it, remember this: the beginning always feels uncomfortable. Climate shock, culture shock, language shock. They arrive together like an uninvited trio. But discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that something new is forming. 2 weeks in America taught me this. You don't need to be ready to begin. You become ready by staying, by listening, by speaking anyway. Even when your sentences wobble. Especially then. Climat shock, culture shock. Have you ever felt cold in a place that wasn't really cold? Not the kind that seeps into your bones, but the kind that makes you hesitate before speaking. That's what climate shock and culture shock together feel like. In America, the weather changes fast, but the social rules change even faster. And when your English is slow, every difference feels louder, sharper, more personal. One morning, I stepped outside wearing a jacket that was clearly wrong. Too thick for the sun. Too thin for the wind. Americans passed by in shorts, hoodies, flip-flops, sometimes all at once, somehow. Nobody explained the logic. There was no logic. And that's when I realized something important. American culture is comfortable with contradiction. The weather doesn't have to make sense. Neither do people. Back home, climate shaped behavior in predictable ways. Here, climate felt like background noise. People adapted without discussing it. But culture? Culture spoke loudly, especially in conversations. Americans love small talk. Weather talk. Weekend talk. Casual questions with no deep expectations. How's it going? Doesn't actually mean they want your life story. I knew this in theory. In real life, my brain still panicked. How long should I answer? 1 sentence? 2? Cultural misunderstandings don't come with warning signs. One day someone said, "We should hang out sometime." I smiled and said yes, then waited. And waited. Nothing happened. Later, I learned this sentence often means friendliness, not a plan. My English understood the words. My cultural brain misunderstood the meaning. This is called pragmatic failure, when language is correct, but interpretation is off. And it's one of the hardest parts of learning a new language. Climate differences showed up inside homes too. Air conditioning everywhere. Strong. Aggressive. Restaurants felt like refrigerators. I shivered, smiling politely, while trying to follow conversations. When your body is uncomfortable, comprehension drops. Studies show physical discomfort reduces listening accuracy. So if you've ever struggled to understand English in a cold room, it's not your fault. Your brain was busy trying to keep you alive. Culture shock also lives in silence. In America, silence in conversation can feel awkward. People fill it quickly. Back home, silence meant respect or thinking. Here, silence felt like a mistake. So I rushed my words. I interrupted myself. I spoke before I was ready. That made my English worse, not better. Speed does not equal fluency. Calm does. One evening, during a casual dinner, I listened more than I spoke. People joked. They teased. They spoke over each other and somehow still understood. I didn't catch every word, but I caught the emotion. Laughter. Warmth. Ease. Linguists say humans process emotional tone faster than vocabulary. That means you can belong to a conversation even when you don't understand everything. This realization was freeing. I started copying rhythms, not sentences. Short responses. Natural pauses. Simple reactions like, "Oh, really?" or "That's interesting." These phrases are cultural bridges. They buy you time. They keep you present. And they are real English. Not the fancy kind. The usable kind. Climate shock slowly faded. I learned to check the weather. Culture shock took longer. I learned that being direct is valued. That saying no is not rude. That smiling is social currency. None of this was in my English textbook. But it lived in every interaction. Here's the punchline. I thought my English was the problem. Often, it was culture. And culture is learned through exposure, not perfection. So if you feel lost, cold, or awkward while learning English, don't blame your vocabulary. You're not failing. You're adjusting. Because in the end, shock means contact. And contact means you're already closer than you think. Love without perfect words. Have you ever tried to explain your feelings, but the words arrived late, wrong, or incomplete? Love doesn't wait for perfect grammar. It never has. And that was the first lesson I learned about love in America. Especially when my English was still stumbling over itself like a child learning to walk. I didn't meet love in a dramatic way. No movie scene. No clever pickup line. Just an ordinary moment, in an ordinary place, with very unordinary fear inside my chest. We were talking about simple things. Weather, food, daily life. My sentences were short. My verbs confused. Sometimes I stopped mid-sentence, searching for a word that refused to come. I apologized a lot. Too much. And then something unexpected happened. She waited. That pause changed everything. In that silence, I realized something powerful. Being understood is not always about speaking well. Sometimes, it's about being given time. Research in communication psychology shows that people who pause and listen create stronger emotional bonds than those who speak fluently but rush. Love, apparently, prefers patience over polish. At first, I was afraid. Afraid that my bad English would make me less interesting, less attractive, less worthy. This fear is common among language learners. Studies show that non-native speakers often link language ability with personal value. When English is weak, self-esteem follows. So I tried to hide my mistakes. I avoided deeper topics. I stayed on safe ground. But love doesn't live on safe ground. One evening, I tried to explain something emotional. Something from my past. My English failed me completely. Words collapsed. Tenses disappeared. I ended up saying, "It was hard for me before." That was it. No details. No beautiful explanation. Just honesty in broken form. And she nodded. Not because she fully understood the story, but because she understood the feeling. Neuroscience tells us that emotional meaning is processed faster than linguistic accuracy. Your brain recognizes sincerity before grammar. That means your accent, your mistakes, your pauses, none of them cancel your emotions. In fact, they sometimes make them clearer. Raw. Real. Love forced me to slow down my English in a good way. When you care, you don't rush. You choose simpler words. You check understanding. You repeat without shame. This is how real communication works. Not the fast, impressive kind. The kind that builds trust. Of course, there were misunderstandings. Funny ones. Painful ones. I once said something that sounded cold when I meant to be honest. Another time, my joke landed like a rock. Cultural differences didn't help. But instead of arguing, we learned to ask, "What do you mean?" That question became our bridge. Simple English. Big impact. Slow English became our language of care. Short sentences. Clear tone. Eye contact. Research shows couples who clarify meaning instead of assuming intention experience less conflict. Language learners are surprisingly good at this, because we have to be careful. In a strange way, my bad English made me a better listener. I stopped chasing perfect sentences. I chased understanding. And love met me there. Not at the level of fluency, but at the level of effort. Here's the truth no one tells you. Perfection creates distance. Vulnerability creates closeness. When your English is imperfect, you're already vulnerable. If you let yourself be seen, that vulnerability becomes connection. So if you're worried that your English is too bad for love, let me say this gently. Love doesn't ask for native-level grammar. It asks if you're willing to show up. Slowly. Honestly. With all your mistakes. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful language of all. Thanksgiving confusion. Have you ever sat at a table full of people, food everywhere, laughter floating in the air, and still felt completely lost? That was me at my first Thanksgiving in America. I knew it was important. I knew it was about family and gratitude. But knowing about something and feeling it are very different things, especially when your English is slow and your culture is different. The house was warm, louder than usual, and smelled like many foods I couldn't name. Turkey, stuffing, gravy. Words I had practiced but never truly understood. Everyone moved with confidence, like this day lived inside their muscles. For me, every step felt like entering a scene without the script. People hugged. They joked. They spoke fast over each other, with references I didn't catch. Football played on TV like a background language I didn't speak either. Someone asked me, "So, what are you thankful for this year?" The table went quiet for half a second. My brain froze. This wasn't small talk. This was emotional. In my culture, gratitude is often private, not announced. In my English, emotions came slowly. I smiled, buying time, while my heart raced. Psychologists say unexpected emotional questions increase cognitive load in second language speakers. In simple words, my brain panicked. I answered with the safest words I had. I am thankful for being here, and for family. It sounded simple. Maybe too simple. But no one laughed. People nodded. Someone smiled warmly. In that moment, I learned something important. Thanksgiving is not about impressive words. It's about shared presence. The ritual matters more than the performance. Still, confusion followed me around the table. Why so much food? Why one day for gratitude? Back home, family gatherings were frequent, messy, unannounced. Here, Thanksgiving felt organized, intentional, almost ceremonial. Culture researchers call this ritualized belonging. Americans create one powerful moment to reconnect, instead of many small ones. Neither way is better. They're just different. During dinner, conversations jumped topics quickly. Politics, work, childhood memories. I caught maybe 60%. The rest I filled in with facial expressions and tone. And surprisingly, it worked. Linguistic studies show listeners can understand emotional intent even with limited vocabulary. That night, I laughed at jokes I didn't fully understand, because laughter is contagious, not grammatical. Then came the silence before eating. A short pause. Heads bowed. Someone said a prayer. I didn't know the words. I didn't know the rhythm. I just closed my eyes. In that quiet moment, I felt included without speaking at all. That was new to me. Silence wasn't awkward here. It was shared. Later, someone asked about my family, about where I came from. My English stumbled again. I mixed past and present. I searched for words like tradition and togetherness. But something had changed. I wasn't afraid. The table felt safe. Safe spaces reduce language anxiety. This is well documented in learning science. When you feel accepted, your brain releases tension. Words flow better. Even simple ones. Thanksgiving taught me that language learning doesn't always happen in classrooms or apps. Sometimes it happens over food you can't pronounce, during conversations you only half understand, in moments where your presence matters more than your fluency. I arrived at that table confused. I left feeling connected. Not because my English improved overnight, but because I learned what family can feel like in America. And that feeling? It spoke a language I finally understood. What family means here. Have you ever realized that you and another person are using the same word, but living in completely different meanings? That's what happened to me with the word family in America. I knew the word. I could spell it. I could say it clearly. But I didn't understand it, not the American version, until after Thanksgiving, when the house got quieter and the real lessons began. In the days after the holiday, I noticed something strange. The family didn't stay together all the time. People left, went back to their own homes, returned to their routines. Back home, family meant constant presence. You didn't schedule closeness. You lived inside it. Here, family felt intentional, chosen, planned, almost protected. At first, this confused me. If family is important, why don't they see each other more? My English asked one question. My culture asked another. And the answers didn't line up neatly. Cultural psychologists explain this difference as collectivism versus individualism. In collectivist cultures, family is built into daily life. In individualist cultures like the US, family is something you return to, not something you're always inside. Neither is cold. Neither is warm. They're just shaped by different histories. I noticed how Americans talk about family. They say things like family time or quality time. Time becomes a resource. something protected from work, distance, and schedules. When someone said, "I'm flying in to see my parents," it sounded special, like an event. In my culture, that sentence wouldn't make sense. You don't fly in. You're already there. My English struggled with this emotional math. If love is real, why is it limited by time? But then I paid attention to actions. Long phone calls. Careful listening. Clear boundaries. Americans may spend less time together, but when they do, they show up fully. Phones down. Attention on. Presence intentional. Studies show that perceived emotional support matters more than frequency of contact. That surprised me. And slowly, it changed how I felt. Family here also speaks more directly. This was hard for me. People said what they needed, what they didn't like, what they couldn't do. No long explanations. No guessing. At first, my brain translated this as distance, coldness. But it wasn't that. It was clarity. And clarity, I learned, is a form of respect. My English didn't like directness. Direct sentences feel sharp when you're used to soft language. But clear English reduced misunderstandings. Fewer hidden expectations. Fewer silent disappointments. Communication science shows that direct communication lowers long-term conflict. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially for language learners, but it creates emotional safety over time. I also noticed how family roles worked here. Children spoke freely. Opinions were welcomed. Even disagreement felt allowed. Respect didn't come from silence. It came from honesty. That challenged everything I knew. My English vocabulary had words for respect, but my emotional dictionary needed updating. One afternoon, I helped clean up after another family meal. Not Thanksgiving, just an ordinary day. No ceremony. No big gathering. Just a few people, shared space, quiet conversation. Someone thanked me. Not casually. Intentionally. That moment stayed with me. Gratitude here is verbal. Frequent. Clear. Americans say thank you a lot. To family, to strangers, to children. Research shows verbal appreciation strengthens relationships. Hearing it regularly builds emotional security. I realized something important about learning English through family life. You don't just learn words. You learn values hidden inside sentences. Take care. Let me know. I appreciate that. These phrases carry culture. They teach you how people connect, set boundaries, and express love. My English became slower but stronger. I asked more questions. Is this okay? What do you think? These simple sentences open doors. When you ask instead of assume, family becomes easier to understand, no matter the culture. Curiosity beats fluency every time. Here's the quiet truth. I stopped measuring family by closeness alone. I started measuring it by care, by effort, by how safe it felt to be honest, even with bad English. Especially with bad English. By the end of that week, family in America made more sense. It wasn't less loving. It was structured differently. Like a house with fewer rooms, but stronger walls. You don't get lost inside it. You know where you stand. If you're learning English and feeling confused by American family culture, don't rush to judge it, or yourself. Understanding comes slowly. Just like language. Just like trust. Because family, I learned, is not about how often you're together. It's about whether you're welcomed when you arrive. Bad English, real feelings. Have you ever felt something so strongly, yet your mouth could only produce the simplest words? Not because the feeling was small, but because your language was. That's where I found myself after those first weeks in America. My English was still bad. Still slow. Still awkward. But my feelings? They were loud. Clear. Impossible to ignore. There's a strange moment every language learner reaches. You stop worrying about grammar tests and start worrying about being understood as a human being. Not did I use the right tense, but did they understand how much this matters to me? That moment arrived quietly for me, during an ordinary conversation that suddenly became emotional. I was trying to explain how tired I felt. Not physically. Emotionally. The kind of tired that comes from translating your thoughts all day, from smiling through confusion, from feeling like half of yourself is always lagging behind. I searched for big words. They didn't come. So I said, I feel very tired inside. That was it. In perfect English, that sentence sounds childish. In real life, it landed exactly where it needed to. Because emotions don't need decoration. They need direction. Neuroscience explains this better than poetry ever could. Emotional processing happens in a different part of the brain than language processing. That means even when your English is limited, your emotions are not. When you speak honestly, even simply, people feel it. Before they analyze your grammar, they recognize your tone, your pauses, your eyes. Real feelings travel faster than perfect sentences. Still, my old fear returned. What if bad English makes me sound less intelligent? Less serious? This fear is common. Studies show non-native speakers are often perceived as less competent, not because they are, but because listeners unconsciously associate fluency with intelligence. Knowing this didn't make it hurt less, but it helped me stop blaming myself. I started to notice something interesting. When I spoke slowly and simply, people listened more carefully. They leaned in. They waited. My bad English created space. Space for listening. Space for empathy. Space for connection. Fluent speakers often fill silence quickly. Language learners respect it. That respect changes conversations. One evening, I tried to say something important about the future. Plans. Commitment. Scary words even in your first language. I warned myself not to rush. I chose small words on purpose. I want to build a life. Not fast, but real. No fancy structure. No perfect rhythm. Just intention. The response wasn't confusion. It was clarity. Communication researchers talk about processing fluency, how easy information is to understand. Simple language increases processing fluency. That means people understand you faster, not slower, when you use clear, basic words. Complex language impresses. Simple language connects. This changed how I practiced English. I stopped chasing advanced vocabulary. I practiced emotional sentences instead. I feel worried. I need time. This matters to me. These sentences are short, but powerful. They carry boundaries. They carry truth. And they are enough for real relationships. Of course, misunderstandings still happened. Bad English doesn't magically disappear. Sometimes I sounded rude when I meant to be honest. Sometimes I sounded unsure when I felt certain. But instead of shutting down, I learned to repair. Sorry, I say wrong. Let me try again. Repair is an advanced communication skill. And language learners practice it daily. Psychology backs this up. Relationships grow stronger not from perfect communication, but from successful repair after misunderstanding. In that sense, learning a language prepares you for real emotional work. You learn humility. You learn patience. You learn to clarify instead of defend. I also noticed how Americans respond to vulnerability. When I admitted my English was bad, people relaxed. They helped. They slowed down. Pretending to be fluent created pressure. Admitting struggle created teamwork. There's a lesson here. Honesty lowers the bar for everyone. My English didn't suddenly improve. But my confidence did. Confidence doesn't come from speaking well. It comes from surviving speaking badly, and realizing you're still accepted, still respected, still loved. Here's the quiet shift that changed everything. I stopped asking, "Is my English good enough?" and started asking, "Am I being real?" The second question has a much kinder answer. Bad English forced me to focus on meaning, on tone, on listening. It stripped away performance and left intention. In a strange way, my language limitations protected my emotions from exaggeration. What I said mattered, because I didn't say much. If you're learning English and feeling ashamed of your mistakes, let me say this clearly. Your English is not the measure of your heart. Real feelings don't require permission from grammar. They don't wait for fluency. They show up anyway. And when they do, even broken English becomes a complete language. Marriage across cultures. Have you ever realized that love is not the hardest part of marriage? Translation is? Not just language translation, but emotional, cultural, invisible translation. When marriage crosses cultures, every sentence carries more weight than it seems. And when your English is still imperfect, that weight can feel heavy enough to bend even the strongest intentions. Before marriage, misunderstandings feel small, cute, even. After marriage, they feel important. Daily life begins. Decisions multiply. Money, time, habits, family, future. These topics demand clarity. And clarity is difficult when your English still trips over itself on ordinary days. I remember the first serious disagreement we had. Not dramatic. No shouting. Just tension. Quiet, slow, uncomfortable tension. I knew what I felt. I knew what I wanted to say. But my English couldn't carry the full meaning. I used words that were too strong, then too weak. I watched confusion appear on her face, not because she didn't care, but because my message arrived broken. This is where many cross-cultural couples struggle. Researchers call it meaning mismatch. The speaker believes the message is clear. The listener hears something else entirely. Add a second language, and the risk doubles. Tone, directness, emotional expectations. None of them translate cleanly. American culture values direct communication. Say what you mean. Mean what you say. My cultural instinct was different. I softened statements. I hinted. I waited. In my language, care lives between the lines. In English, especially American English, care lives inside the sentence. If you don't say it, it might not be heard. At first, I felt exposed. Direct English felt rude, dangerous. But avoiding directness created more confusion. So we made a quiet agreement. Slow down. Ask again. Clarify without blaming. This changed everything. We learned to use simple English for hard feelings. Short sentences. Clear structure. No metaphors. I feel hurt when this happens. I need more time. I am not angry. I am tired. These sentences sound basic. They are not. They are emotionally advanced. Psychology supports this. Clear I statements reduce defensiveness and increase empathy. They are especially powerful in multilingual relationships. When language is limited, Simplicity becomes strength. Marriage also forced me to listen differently. Not just for words, but for intention. When you live with someone from another culture, you learn that tone may lie. Habit may lie. But patterns don't. Over time, you recognize meaning without full sentences. A pause. A sigh. A look. Language expands beyond English. I also learned that Americans often separate emotion from intention. You can disagree and still care. You can say no and still love someone. This was new to me. In my culture, disagreement risks harmony. In American culture, disagreement can protect honesty. Learning this saved us many unnecessary hurts. There were moments when my bad English made me feel small inside the marriage. When I couldn't argue well. When I couldn't explain myself fully. Power imbalance is real in bilingual relationships. Studies show the more fluent partner often controls conversations unintentionally. Naming this helped us rebalance. We slowed down together. We created space. And something beautiful happened. My English improved, not from studying, but from caring. Marriage gave my language purpose. Words stopped being abstract. They became tools for peace, for repair, for planning a life. I stopped chasing native English. I chased shared English. The kind that belongs to both of us. With inside jokes, repeated phrases, familiar rhythms. Linguists call this relational language. A private system couples build over time. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to work. Here's the unexpected truth. My bad English made our marriage stronger. It forced patience. It forced listening. It forced honesty. You can't hide behind beautiful words when you don't have them. You show up as you are. If you're learning English and dreaming of love, marriage, or family in another culture, don't wait for fluency. Start with clarity. Start with kindness. Start with courage to say simple things slowly. Because marriage across cultures doesn't require perfect English. It requires the willingness to translate your heart, again and again, until it is finally heard. Small English daily life. Have you ever noticed that life doesn't ask for big words? It asks for the right ones at the right moment? After marriage, English stopped being a dream and became a daily tool. Not the impressive kind. The small kind. The kind you use when you're tired, busy, emotional, and still need to be understood. This was the phase where my English didn't level up dramatically, but my life did. Daily life in America runs on short sentences. Trash day is Tuesday. Did you lock the door? We're out of milk. These sentences don't appear in textbooks. They appear at 7 a.m., when your brain is half asleep and your patience is thin. That's when language shows its true power, or its weakness. At first, I felt embarrassed. After all this effort, was my English journey really about groceries and schedules? But cognitive science says habits shape learning more than intensity. Repeated, meaningful exposure wires the brain faster than rare, dramatic effort. In simple words, daily English beats perfect English. I started noticing how often I used the same phrases. Are you okay? I'll take care of it. Can we talk later? These sentences became anchors. Familiar. Safe. They reduced stress because my brain didn't have to search for language. It recognized patterns. Pattern recognition is how fluency actually grows. Then came family routines. Meals. Chores. Planning. Small negotiations. You cook, I clean. Let's leave at 6. Maybe tomorrow. None of this required advanced vocabulary, but it required clarity. Misunderstandings here didn't just feel awkward, they had consequences. Burned food. Missed appointments. Hurt feelings. This is where slow English saved me. Speaking slowly gave my brain time to choose accuracy over speed. Research shows that slowing speech improves both comprehension and confidence for second language speakers. Silence became a tool, not a failure. Pausing meant thinking. Thinking meant fewer mistakes. I also learned the value of repetition. Native speakers repeat themselves all the time. Language learners think repetition is weakness. It's not. It's how humans coordinate. So, we're meeting at 6? Yes, 6. Repetition confirms reality. It builds trust. It prevents conflict. One surprising lesson came from children. Kids use small English naturally. Short sentences. Clear needs. Honest emotions. Watching them reminded me that language starts simple for everyone. Fluency doesn't begin with complexity. It begins with usefulness. I noticed how my listening improved faster than my speaking. This is normal. The brain prioritizes understanding before production. Accepting this stopped me from pushing myself too hard. Pressure slows learning. Permission speeds it up. At home, we created our own English. A shared rhythm. Certain phrases meant more than their literal meaning. It's one of those days, covered 1,000 emotions. Let's reset meant pause, not quit. This kind of language isn't taught. It's grown. Science calls this contextualized language. Words gain meaning from shared experience. That's why daily life is the best teacher. Your brain remembers language tied to emotion and action far longer than language tied to drills. I also learned to forgive my English on bad days. Tired English. emotional English, angry English. They're all part of the process. Perfection is not the goal. Stability is. Being understood well enough to live peacefully, that's success. If you're learning English and feel stuck because your conversations are simple, let me reframe that for you. Simple is not stuck. Simple is functional. Simple is where life happens. Big English is for speeches. Small English is for love, family, routine, and repair. And those things matter more. Over time, something subtle changed. I stopped translating everything in my head. Some phrases just existed. Ready. Automatic. That's fluency's quiet arrival, not fireworks, but familiarity. So if your English today feels small, let it be small. Use it. Repeat it. Live inside it. Language grows where it's needed most. And most of life, it turns out, only needs small English. Science of slow learning. Have you ever wondered why you understand English better when you stop trying so hard? Not when you push. Not when you force yourself to sound fluent. But when you slow down, everything suddenly clicks. This is not magic. This is science. And once I understood it, I stopped fighting my brain and started learning with it. For a long time, I believed speed meant progress. Fast listening. Fast speaking. Fast thinking in English. I thought if I slowed down, I would fall behind. But neuroscience says the opposite. Your brain does not learn language best when it is rushed. It learns best when it feels safe. When you learn a new language, your brain treats it like a potential threat. New sounds. New rules. New social risks. Every conversation carries the danger of embarrassment or rejection. When that threat is high, your brain activates the stress response. Cortisol goes up. Memory goes down. Listening narrows. Words disappear. This is why your English feels worse when you're nervous, even if you know the words. Slow learning lowers that threat. When you listen to slow English, your brain has time to process sound, meaning, and emotion separately. This matters. Research in psycholinguistics shows that comprehension improves dramatically when input speed is slightly below your maximum capacity. Not too easy. Not too hard. Just slow enough to breathe. That breathing part is important. Slow speech naturally slows your breathing. Slow breathing sends a signal to your nervous system, we're okay. When your nervous system calms down, your brain opens up. Attention improves. Memory strengthens. Learning accelerates. So when you practice slow English, you're not being lazy. You're being strategic. I noticed this in my own life. When people spoke fast, I understood less, but blamed myself. When they slowed down, I understood more, and felt confident. Confidence then improved my speaking. This is called a positive feedback loop. Calm leads to clarity. Clarity leads to confidence. Confidence leads to progress. Another powerful concept is comprehensible input. Language scientists agree on this. You learn best when you understand most, but not all of what you hear. That small gap forces growth without overwhelm. Slow English naturally creates this condition. You catch the structure. You predict meaning. Your brain fills in gaps. This active guessing strengthens neural connections. Emotion plays a huge role here. Memory is emotional before it is logical. You remember language tied to feelings far longer than language tied to rules. That's why learning English through stories works. Stories give context. Characters give emotion. Your brain doesn't store isolated sentences well, but it remembers moments. When I listened to slow, emotional English, I wasn't just learning words. I was learning rhythm, tone, intent. These are things textbooks can't teach. Your brain is wired for narrative. That's how humans shared knowledge long before classrooms existed. There's also something called error tolerance. When you learn slowly, you make fewer mistakes, but you notice them more clearly. Instead of panicking, you adjust. This improves long-term accuracy. Fast learning creates shallow fluency. Slow learning creates deep understanding. I used to feel ashamed of repeating the same simple phrases. But repetition is how the brain builds automaticity. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathway. Think of it like walking through tall grass. The first time is hard. After many passes, a clear path forms. That's fluency. Another key principle is spaced repetition. Your brain forgets quickly, but relearns faster each time. Daily slow practice, even short, beats long intense sessions. 5 minutes of calm listening every day changes your brain more than one stressful hour a week. I also learned to respect my limits. Fatigue blocks learning. When you're tired, your brain protects energy by shutting down complex processing. That's not failure. That's biology. Slow learning works with energy cycles, not against them. Here's the most important insight. Perfection is not a learning goal. It's a performance goal. Learning requires messiness, pauses, mistakes, silence. Slow English creates room for all of that. Once I stopped rushing, my English didn't just improve, it stayed. Retention increased. Anxiety dropped. Listening became enjoyable. And enjoyment is the strongest predictor of long-term success in language learning. If you're frustrated with your progress, don't ask, "How can I learn faster?" Ask, "How can I learn comma?" Your brain already knows the answer. Because slow learning isn't weak. It's how the brain was designed to learn. Still loved, still enough. Have you ever waited for a moment when someone would finally say, "Your English is good enough now"? I waited for that moment longer than I want to admit. I thought love, respect, and belonging were rewards you earn after fluency. What I didn't realize is that I was already receiving all three, quietly, consistently, while my English was still imperfect. There was no big announcement. No dramatic realization. Just a series of small moments that added up to something undeniable. Someone listened without correcting me. Someone asked me to repeat, not because they were annoyed, but because they cared. Someone trusted me with responsibility, with emotion, with family matters. Even when my sentences were simple and slow. That's when it hit me. I was still loved. Still enough. Not despite my English, but alongside it. For a long time, I tied my self-worth to language performance. When my English was bad, I felt small. When it improved a little, I felt temporarily bigger. This emotional roller coaster is common among adult language learners. Psychologists call it conditional self-esteem, when your value depends on performance. The problem is, performance is unstable. Language fluctuates with mood, fatigue, stress. So if your worth depends on fluency, your worth never feels secure. Love changed that math. I noticed that the people closest to me didn't measure me by how well I spoke. They measured me by consistency. By showing up. By trying. By caring enough to communicate, even when it was uncomfortable. Research on attachment shows that reliability builds trust faster than eloquence. Being emotionally predictable matters more than speaking perfectly. There were days my English felt worse than before. Stress does that. Emotional topics do that. I would apologize. Again. And again. One day someone said gently, "You don't have to be sorry all the time." That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't about language. It was about permission, to exist without constant self-correction. I started paying attention to how love actually functions in daily life. Love waits. Love clarifies. Love asks follow-up questions. Love doesn't rush you to finish your sentence. Love doesn't equate accent with intelligence. These behaviors aren't romantic. They're practical. And they're powerful. Sociolinguistics backs this up. In close relationships, communicative success depends less on linguistic accuracy and more on shared context. Over time, people understand you because they know you, not because you speak well. Your patterns become familiar. Your pauses predictable. Meaning fills in the gaps. I realized something else too. My imperfect English filtered my relationships. People who needed me to sound impressive didn't stay close. People who valued sincerity did. This wasn't a loss. It was alignment. Language limitations acted like a quiet boundary, keeping the connection real. There's also a cultural piece here. In America, confidence is often associated with fluent speech. But intimacy works differently. Intimacy values honesty over performance. When I stopped trying to sound confident and allowed myself to sound honest, relationships deepened. Vulnerability invited care. I remember a moment when I needed help. Real help. Asking was hard. My English couldn't soften the request. I said it plainly. I need help with this. I'm overwhelmed. No storytelling. No explanation. Just truth. The response wasn't judgment. It was action. Help arrived. That's when I understood. Needing help does not reduce your value. It reveals trust. From a psychological perspective, this is crucial. Humans bond through mutual vulnerability. When language learners hide struggle to appear fluent, they block bonding. When they reveal effort and limitation, they open connection. Your bad English might actually be an asset in building real relationships, if you let it be seen. I stopped waiting for permission to belong. I stopped asking myself if I was enough yet. I was already inside the circle. Already trusted. Already loved. The question was never about my English. It was about whether I believed that love could arrive before perfection. Once I accepted that, my learning changed. Pressure dropped. Shame loosened. And ironically, my English improved faster. Not because I tried harder, but because I felt safer. Safety accelerates learning. This is not motivational talk. It's biology. When the brain feels accepted, it takes risks. Risk-taking is essential for language growth. Here's the quiet truth I wish someone had told me earlier. Fluency is not the entry fee for love. It's a side effect of living fully in the language. You don't earn belonging by speaking well. You learn to speak well by belonging. So if you're listening to this with bad English, slow English, embarrassed English, hear this clearly. You are not a draft version waiting to be finalized. You are not a project. You are a person. Still loved. Still enough. Right now. And once you truly believe that, English stops being a test and becomes a bridge. Thanksgiving lesson. Have you ever noticed how some lessons don't arrive as advice, but as quiet understanding? Long after the moment has passed? That's what happened to me when Thanksgiving ended. Not during the meal. Not during the laughter. But afterward, when the house returned to normal, and I realized something had shifted inside me. My English was still imperfect. My accent was still strong. But the question that haunted me for weeks, am I enough like this? Had finally gone quiet. Thanksgiving, in the American sense, is supposed to be about gratitude. But for me, The real lesson wasn't about being thankful. It was about being accepted. Accepted with pauses. Accepted with mistakes. Accepted without performance. And that realization tied everything together: language, love, family, and learning. In the days after Thanksgiving, life didn't slow down for reflection. Dishes still needed washing. Work still needed doing. Conversations still happened in English. But something felt different. I no longer braced myself before speaking. I no longer rehearsed every sentence in my head like a defense strategy. I spoke. Slowly. Honestly. And if the sentence came out wrong, I fixed it. Or I didn't. And the world didn't end. Cognitive psychology explains this shift as threat reduction. When the brain no longer perceives social danger, it reallocates energy from self-protection to creativity and learning. In simple terms, when you stop being afraid of sounding stupid, you actually become clearer. Thanksgiving didn't improve my English directly. It removed fear. And fear was the real barrier all along. I thought back to the title question that once felt so heavy: Bad English still loved? Do you need perfection? 2 weeks in America had answered it. Not with theory, but with lived experience. Love didn't wait for my fluency. Family didn't require polished sentences. Connection happened in real time, with real limitations. I started noticing this pattern everywhere. In small conversations. In quiet moments. People responded to intention, not grammar. They responded to tone, not tense. When I spoke slowly, people slowed down with me. When I admitted confusion, people clarified. Communication became cooperative instead of competitive. There's a scientific reason for this. Humans are wired for cooperation, not linguistic evaluation. In safe social environments, listeners naturally adapt to speakers. They simplify language. They repeat. They gesture. This is called communication accommodation. It's automatic. But it only activates when you allow yourself to be seen as a learner, not as someone pretending to be perfect. Thanksgiving taught me that American family culture is built around shared moments, not shared history. You don't need to grow up together to belong. You need to show up. Sit at the table. Listen. Speak when you can. Stay when it's uncomfortable. That's enough. And that lesson extends directly to learning English. You don't need to sound native to start living in the language. You don't need advanced vocabulary to express love, gratitude, or commitment. The most important sentences in life are short. I'm here. Ikare. I don't understand yet. These sentences build families. They build marriages. They build confidence. I also realized something about motivation. People don't quit English because it's hard. They quit because it hurts. It hurts to feel small. It hurts to feel judged. It hurts to feel invisible. When learning becomes emotionally safe, motivation returns naturally. You don't need discipline. You need permission to be slow, to be imperfect, to be human. That's why learning English through stories matters. Stories reduce pressure. They carry emotion. They let your brain learn without feeling tested. When you listen to a story, you're not trying to be right. You're trying to understand. And understanding is the heart of language. As this story ends, nothing dramatic happens. No sadem fluenki. No perfect pronunciation. Just a quiet confidence. A steady belief that I can continue. That I don't have to rush. That I don't have to earn my place through grammar. The happy ending isn't about English. The happy ending is this: I stopped asking if I deserved to belong, and started living as if I already did. If you're watching this video and feeling tired, slow, or discouraged with your English, let this be your reminder. You don't need perfection to be respected. You don't need fluency to be loved. You don't need to fix yourself before you start living. Start with slow English. Simple words. Real stories. Let language grow the way relationships grow, through time, patience, and trust. And maybe one day, without realizing it, you'll look back and notice the same thing I did. You were never behind. You were just learning in a human way. If you've made it this far, let me leave you with one final thought, the kind that stays with you long after the video ends. Maybe the real problem was never your English. Maybe it was the belief that you had to be perfect before you were allowed to belong. You don't. You can learn English slowly. You can speak English with mistakes. You can still be understood, respected, and loved. And in the next videos on this channel, we're going even deeper. Real stories, slow English, clear pronunciation, emotional learning, and moments that feel real, not like a textbook. Stories that don't just teach you English listening, speaking, and vocabulary, but change how you feel about using English in real life. So if you're tired of fast English, if you're tired of feeling behind, if you want English that feels human, calm, and meaningful, subscribe to this channel now. Like this video to support slow, story-based English learning. Comment, I'm still learning, and that's okay. Because the next story might answer a question you've been carrying quietly for a long time. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next video.